Yeah,
Yeah, there's
go to
tabs. So Susan's was answered. There's a couple of open ones right now.
there's tabs at the top of the Q&A that say open, answered, and dismissed.
So, thanks. Yeah, for everybody that's joining us, I said this earlier. This is only the second town hall that we've done, and the guy that did the first one, Matt Ryan, is on a plane headed to Midland. So, forgive us if we have a couple of growing pains with this one. But hopefully we'll get the important information to you and answer your questions if you have any. Well, answer your questions. And then I'm gonna go ahead and kick it off here. Hi, I'm Steve Taylor. I'm the president of Ezra. With me on the sort of the panel up here, Sierra Stockwell, Andy Berger, who's our executive director. We got Paul Holmes, who's our lead for the hybrids. Anita Jimenez, who is our competition rules lead, our judging lead, and Jim Jarvis, who is stepping into the role of RSO this year. So good deal. And with me, although you can't, oh, I'm sorry, I had to go one more. Again, I left her out last time we discussed. This is Stephanie Taylor, who's with me in Midland. So Stephanie is our event manager. So okay, Sierra, we're ready to move on.
Yes. Also, just so Jim knows, I promoted you to panelist, so you can see the Q&A now.
Oh, there you go. So quick agenda. Going to go through our decision process on the moving the competition to Midland. We've got some updates from Jim on our DTAG, and also I saw some references to progress reports, and then we're going to go Q&A. So let's move her on. So just a refresher, what we were looking for from the site, the new site for a hosting city. It would have to be able to hold an event of this size, close to an international airport. Convention center had to be able to accommodate the number of attendees that we planned for this year. Launch site had to have between a 50 and 100K waiver. And an award ceremony. We like the basketball style arena that we've had the last couple of years, but this year it's going to be on a flat floor. Well, in another convention center. So let's go ahead and move on, Sierra. So just to give you what we did, and here's our evaluation. So I'll start with Spaceport America on the right-hand side. We were not able to increase our waiver out at the spaceport. If we looked at the land status, of course, we had land status was fine. The convention center was at overcapacity, and we knew that the city could host this event, even though the convention center was at overcapacity, and we wouldn't be able to achieve the increased engineering challenges that we'll be looking to for this event and for future events. So we moved on to Cedar City. Cedar City had a beautiful site. The issues came with obtaining a waiver and getting approval for the land. Initially we looked at BLM land and found out that BLM land would take a year just to get a survey done before we could use it. The team took a look at, well, what are the other options? And there was some state-owned land, a mile by mile square, that we could have used, but we couldn't get approval in time, and plus we had to get a archaeological dig done before they could approve the land, and we needed to get the land approval before we could get the waiver approved. So again, we wouldn't be able to hold the higher categories that we're looking to do this year. So we ended up with real hard work from what I call the bird dog team, which was 3 of our volunteers that just really took this waiver thing and took it to task, got it paperwork filled out. We had actually Senate focus on this through the local senators at either both from the Utah and from Texas. We have a private landowner who's authorized us to use the land. We've got the waiver approved. There's a couple of little details that need to be worked out, but the waiver has conditionally been approved. And you'll see that the convention center is just going to be a much more suitable space for us. The host city, this is an industrial area. The host city is perfectly capable of hosting this event. The one thing is that the host city is just a little bit far from the launch site, and we'll go through that. But that's why they have kind of a purple box there, a blue box. Next slide. So for those of you that haven't seen this yet, and I think we've published this through our social media channels, but the convention center is the Midland County Horseshoe is the name of it, which is kind of quaint, actually. It's you'll see it's a big area and much larger than what we had in the past. The launch site, those are the GPS coordinates. It's near Saragossa, Texas. And then the award ceremony is going to be back in Midland at a different convention center, the Bush Convention Center. So those are the URLs and the GPS coordinates. Next slide, please. So this is the Horseshoe. And it is a large facility. We showed you some slides. I mean, just the parking spaces are crazy. The number of parking spaces. In the middle is really where the convention center is going to be held. There's a rodeo arena attached to it with livestock pens, which obviously we're not going to use, but just to give you an idea of the sorts of events that they hold there. And then on the right-hand side, there's a amphitheater for concerts and that sort of thing. But next slide, please. We'll give you a little peek into the inside here. So if you look at Hall S, Hall S is bigger than the main hall where all the students' tables were in Las Cruces. But we're going to have the whole thing. We're going to have Hall A, B, and S as part of the competition. So you could see it's well more than 2 times the size of the event space that we had in Las Cruces. On the left-hand side, in between the halls and the terrace, those are going to be the meeting rooms. So we have the podium sessions that'll be set up in those rooms. And there's ample space for that sort of thing. The vendors and potentially even the flight safety reviews are all going to be done probably in that Hall A-ish area. But we're here today and tomorrow and Saturday, so we're going to map all that out. So we'll be able to give you a better idea of how that is going to flow, and we have the minds that put together the process with us. So that's going to be helpful. And then the other thing, if you look at the right-hand side, it actually has a dedicated stage with lighting, and the hall itself has got an amazing sound system through it. So you won't have trouble hearing announcements. You won't have trouble with us doing our introductory presentation for opening ceremony. All in all, just a much nicer facility. Next slide, please. And we went through this with you before. The upper left-hand quadrant has both the rodeo area and the convention center area. Middle is the stage. Right hand is just a hallway. I mean, just to show you how nice even the hallways are. There's one of the podium session rooms set up, and then you could just see how large the convention center is in the center slide. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to the next slide. Okay, this is a video just again to show you around it's literally in the middle of nowhere. large open swaths of land. This is, though, an active oil field. And so there will be potentially pump heads and some electrical lines that I don't think will be in play, but just to make you aware that that's the environment that we're going to be in. It's desert, just it's not that much different than the stuff in New Mexico, but just wide open area. The site, this I guess here's the two big things that I haven't said just yet. We're going to be able to do our two-stage category, which is the 30K and the 45K rockets. And we now have a waiver where we could do demonstration flights upwards to 100,000 feet. So the teams that are ready, and it's not for this year because I think we've already accepted who we're accepting, but we'll have a higher waiver for years to come. If you're looking for a challenge, that's a pretty good challenge. Okay, next slide. From a logistics standpoint, I know that this map isn't real great, but you'll see that Midland is about 2 hours away. For those of you that are wondering, we're not going to have the sort of queue up delays just to get into the launch site this year. There won't be any camping on site for students, but you could get out there and no one's going to stop you after, whenever you'd like to be out there, with the exception of staying overnight. In mornings are going to be wide open. You won't be queued up. You could take some of that angst out of, getting to the field and getting to your tent and that sort of thing. That's if you stay in Midland. That's about 2 hours. If you stay in what looks like it's pronounced Pecos, it's actually, here they pronounce it Pecos. And I'm not sure why, but that's the way it's pronounced out in West Texas out here. And that, if you look at Pecos, it's about a 40-minute drive to the site. Not a bad place to stay. And then the other site there is Fort Stockton, which is about an hour away from the launch site. So, and then there's towns all along, I believe it's Route 20, where there's other places to stay. But those are, when we looked at it, those are kind of the main hubs where I think people would like to stay, with Airbnbs and hotels and that sort of thing. Okay, next slide. And then this is the award ceremony. Believe it or not, Midland has 2 convention centers, and this one is a little small for us to hold the entire event in, with tables and rockets and that sort of thing, but it's perfectly suited for us for the award ceremony. And actually, hopefully it'll take teams less time to get down to the stage, because we're all going to be on one floor. So hopefully we can streamline the award ceremony a little bit. So all in all, fantastic site, motivated folks we're working with, both from the landowner's perspective and the city of Midland. Just a very welcoming, and it's going to be a fantastic place to hold this event. So with that, we can go to the next slide, and I think I might pass this off to Jim Jarvis.
Steve, can I add just a couple little tidbits specific to the convention center?
Oh, sure.
Okay. I know there's going to be questions about this, maybe not asking immediately, but eventually they will. One of the big questions that we had for them was food. The convention center in Las Cruces had severe restrictions. You can only eat their food inside. If you went outside and got food, you're not allowed to bring it inside. That is absolutely not the case here. There are Starbucks around the corner. There are a multitude. Steve and I did some exploration, and within probably a half mile of the facility are a multitude of places to eat, places to pick up food, pizzas, whatever you want. And I believe also that, and I can't confirm this yet, but they are looking at trying to bring in some food truck vendors who will be literally on site. So you can sort of have your pick of food instead of eating the food that only they provide. You can bring outside food in, you can bring outside drinks in, no restrictions from that side. And again, I can't tell you, the parking situation is phenomenal. Maybe 50 to 100 feet to the good parking spots. And if you want to park way in the back, you can certainly do that and get a bunch of free space. You can bring your trailers, you can bring whatever you need to. I believe it's like at least 1,000 cars they can handle without a problem. So very excited about this place. You won't be elbows and butt cheeks, that kind of situation. There's going to be a ton of space available. We'll spread the tables out, chairs, all of those kind of functions are now available. And we won't have any fire marshals breathing down our neck if we bring in many more people. We can actually add a ton of people to this. So again, the facility is amazing. Very excited to be utilizing it. I think you guys will be really happy with it.
Yeah, and the other thing that we were addressing that I forgot to mention is student lounge areas. So there'll be spots, even if it's in they had bleachers that they'll pull out. So there'll be plenty of places to eat and lounge and collaborate with your other students. So it's all in all, I hope you'll be pleased with the selection of the new city. And with that, Jim, I think we're gonna throw the ball over to you.
Okay, thanks, Steve. I guess a couple of weeks ago, my friend, Steve, asked me to serve as the RSO for the event. Mainly because Ken Overton, who's been the RSO for the last several years, has a conflict for the dates of the event this year. So I'm sort of the 1 year only, I hope, RSO, and I'm looking forward to doing it. I've been trying to catch up with a few things associated with that role, since we have the progress report 2 coming up here very quickly, and I've seen a lot of them come in already. One of the things that I noted are that we've had some differences or conflicting information in the DTAG, and so we've been trying to kind of figure out what we can do to get those issues resolved. The DTAG has always been a rat's nest of conflicting requirements and goals and rules and so forth, and every year it gets better, but we're still in the process of finding things that are not really what we want to have. So this particular slide is showing changes to the DTAG that have been either already communicated on HeroX, and they're already in the current version of the DTAG. And I just wanted to run through a couple of them just to make sure we don't have any confusion, or any more confusion than is necessary. 9.2 talks about payload recovery systems. And in the past, payloads have been allowed to single deploy from Apogee. And it really makes no sense to allow that, because it's only the most unusual weather condition that will result in a payload not drifting out of the waivered radius. And so we're under Tripoli rules, we're Tripoli launch, we can't have parts of the rocket that are drifting outside of our area of operation. So we simply can't allow payloads to be deployed on a main chute. We can allow dual deploy on payloads. So if payload is put out at Apogee, then presumably that's on a drogue, and then you would deploy a main at some point below 1,500 feet. So that's the purpose of the wording here. And kind of the way that we look at it is that the recovery aspect of the payload is basically identical to the recovery of the rocket itself. So, rockets require dual deploy, they require redundant electronics, one of those flight computers being a COTS altimeter, they require a GPS. So basically the rules are the same for payloads and rockets. And if you think of it that way, it's fairly easy to understand the requirements. 9.4.1 talks about payload energetics. And obviously, if you're going to allow dual deploy on payloads, you have to allow payload energetics for the recovery, basically for putting out the main parachute below 1,500 feet. So that rule is now allows payload energetics only for the purpose of recovery. Any other form of pyrotechnics or energetics on payloads are not allowed. One rule that's also recent is that rockets with deployable payloads shall contain no more than one independently recoverable body. And you'll hear me talk about the spirit of the DTAG in some of the upcoming slides. I'm not necessarily convinced that every rule has to be rigorously enforced, but the spirit of the DTAG does. And the point of a single independently recoverable body is we don't want to have payload parts raining down. We don't want putting out 15 toy soldiers as part of the part of your payload event. So if you have something you've been working on that happens to be too, you know, I mean, we can look at those on a case-by-case basis, but the idea is that we want to limit the number of objects that are coming down from apogee. 5.3.2, there was a requirement that COTS motors shall be started using the igniter supplied by the manufacturer. And that requirement is just simply wrong. And I'll go so far as to say that Aerotech has said that some of the igniters they provide with the largest motors, they don't really intend teams to use those igniters. They're too small. They're going to cause the motor to chuck on the pad, and other bad things are going to happen. So you do not have to use the igniter supplied by the manufacturer. There's still a rule in there about modifying the commercial igniter that's going to stay in place. So you can't take the commercial igniter and redip that in pyrogen or somehow otherwise modify that. But you can come up with your own igniter. And my understanding is that Wildman is going to be selling some igniters on site that you can use. You have that option, or you can do something of your own choosing. Please tell your safety reviewer what it is that you're planning to use for your igniter so that that can be reviewed as part of the safety report. The last one on this page is that all energetic devices shall be externally actuatable and controllable. And I think the intent of this change was to explicitly allow things like magnetic switches and the turn-on coil for multitronics and so forth. It was not exactly obvious that those are externally accessible devices, which is what the original wording was. So we wanted to explicitly recognize that that such devices can be used to turn on the rocket. Now, I will say the current wording was changed to externally actuatable. I want to make sure that it's recognized that if you have a hatch that you're taking off to access the switch to turn on electronics, that is still allowed. So you can go on to the next. So unfortunately, there are a few changes that have been made that are not yet published, and I wanted to take this opportunity to put those out to the group. And again, I apologize for the last minute changes on here. We're trying to make this document as reasonable as we can, but some of these things are just a little bit late due to our timing. One of the things that a number of teams have pointed out is that 9.1.3 exempts payloads from the dual deploy requirement if they contain parachutes and parafoils. And that obviously conflicts with the change in requiring dual deploy for any payload above 1,500 feet. So we deleted 9.1.3. any payload is subject to dual deploy if it's deployed above 1,500 feet. A second clarification is that the DTAG currently says that altimeters and GPS have to be independently powered. So basically the idea is, you have an altimeter, it's on one battery, you have a GPS, it's on another battery, and they shall not be powered by the same switch in the same battery. So this makes it difficult to consider some COTS flight computers like Telemegas and AIM Extras that have GPS as part of the flight computer. So this rule is to explicitly allow those sorts of altimeters to be used as your primary flight computer and your primary GPS if you want to do that. 4.1.3 is a clarification to require a COTS GPS on any independently recovered part of the rocket. This is the one I suspect that will most affect teams, because I know there are at least some teams that have proposed using SRAD altimeters. When I've looked at this, it looks to me like most teams have a COTS GPS. And if you look at the DTAG now, you'll see it strongly implies that a COTS GPS should be used. There are recommendations for COTS GPS units and a table that say what units are recommended, but there is also something saying that SRAD GPS units are approved as GPS units. The rule change is that there will now be a required COTS GPS. You can still use an SRAD GPS, but only as a backup to the COTS GPS. And the reason for this, if you were out at Spaceport last year, you know that there were launch operations that were restricted or inhibited or delayed because of teams looking for rockets and trying to recover their rockets. So a big goal of the competition is to recover rockets as fast as absolutely possible. We feel that's best done with a COTS GPS as opposed to an SRAM GPS. Now, again, if there's a team that comes in and says, hey, our payload is 3 GPSs and we've been working on them for 6 months, and I think we can consider some exceptions to that rule. But please don't ask us for an exception on your egg timer. Your egg timer GPS is not going to be allowed. You can go ahead, Sierra. I also wanted to provide just a couple of comments on the progress report reviews. One of the things that's coming up here shortly is we're going to get all of the second progress reports in, and we're going to start having a dozen or more reviewers go through those and comment and provide comments back to you. One of the things I've noticed over time is that not necessarily all the reviewers are on the same page with the reviews and interpreting the DTAG requirements. And we're going to try to fix some of that if we can, so that we're not telling one team one thing and another team something else. So I just wanted to highlight a few objectives of the progress report review process. One is obviously just to promote safety, and the two things that are most important: minimizing ballistic recoveries and minimizing long searches. So that's one of the things that we're going to try to focus on. We're going to try to provide fair and consistent reviews and uniform applications of the rules. One of the things I want to emphasize, and I'm sure that a lot of teams are not really aware of this, but the safety review process has absolutely no influence on your competition score whatsoever. Nothing that you deal with on the review ends up being part of your score. The way I kind of think of it is the safety review process is intended to help you have a safe flight, and also to help you avoid coming to the competition with a rocket that's going to be turned down because it's not safe. We've had cases in the past where teams have had to go out and put on tip-to-tip reinforcement on their fins at the competition because the fins were judged inadequate. So we're kind of trying to prevent that from happening and prevent you coming to the competition and then running into some fatal flaw that requires you to remediate or potentially even not be able to fly. So I want to encourage teams to fess up on what you're doing. Tell your reviewer what you're up to and what your concerns are about the rocket and get their opinion. And you can do that without fear that it's going to influence your score. One of the other objectives we're always trying to do, it's engineering competition. So we're trying to maximize the engineering latitude that we allow within the spirit of the detail. And so, as I mentioned previously, we can consider exceptions. If you have something that is maybe it doesn't strictly follow the letter of the law on the safety part of it, but it actually is safe. I mean, we can certainly consider that because the spirit of the DTAG is a safe flight. And if you're doing something that's interesting engineering wise and is safe, that's something that we should be able to review and consider. So to the extent possible, we will try to look at those things on a case-by-case basis. Again, don't come and tell us you want to come out with 5 separate payloads. You're not going to get that kind of stuff. But if you got something that you think is a gray area, feel free to bring it to our attention. Okay. As a part of the reviews, there are some areas that we're going to be focusing on and trying to make sure that all the reviewers are consistent on. And we've had some discussions on this just over the last few days. One area that is confusing is what is this stability rule that requires 1.5 caliber? What the heck does that mean? And one of the things that confuses me is sometimes I look at the open rocket simulations, and if you've got wind in your simulation, you may see a stability that is well below 1.5 calibers. So one of the things that I want to ask the teams to do and ask the reviewers to do is do one of the simulations with no wind, because the number that we're interested in is what is the stability with no wind. So basically you can run your simulation, look at the graph of the output and give us the first number that shows up on the graph. That's the stability number that we want. Now, beyond that, the rocket also has to remain above that value for the entire flight. And stabilities can go down when velocities are very high. And I don't know if we're going to see that situation. We may in the 45K area. I'm not real sure. We'll see. But that's what we're going to be doing on the 1.5 caliber rule. The second item is the rail exit velocity. This is always something that is confusing as to how it is we go about calculating that. And we're going to be kind of focusing on the rail exit velocity. One reason for that is that the thrust to weight ratio calculation is sort of confusing. And it's difficult to look at just the thrust to weight ratio and say a motor is adequate or not. So we want to have the exit velocity calculated accurately. And so there's a couple of formulas that you can use to calculate what is the effective length of the rail that you're flying from. You can take the length of the rail itself, and then you can subtract the distance to the low button, and then the distance between the first and the second buttons, and that gives you a number. Or you can just take the rail length and subtract the distance from the bottom of the rocket to the top button, and that gives you the effective rail length as well. So, for example, if you have a 17-foot rail and your rocket has a button located 3 feet up off the bottom of the rocket and another one at 6 feet off the bottom of the rocket, that difference to the top button is 16 feet, is 6 feet. And so your effective rail length is 11 feet for a 17-foot rail. So go through the simulation and then determine what your rail velocity is at the time when you've reached an altitude of 16 feet. And that's the rail exit velocity that we want to see quoted. And that we'll hopefully be double checking as part of the safety reviews. One thing I just want to caution teams about is short fin spans. And this was the issue that was brought to my attention by Chuck Rogers a few years ago. He says, hey, guess what? RAS arrow may not be accurately predicting stabilities when you have short fin spans. And he doesn't really know. And so, it has to do with things like shadowing the fins and things like that happen on short fin spans. So we'll be paying extra attention if you come in with a short fin span. And the short fin span is something that might be something like less than 80% of the diameter of the rocket. So you'll probably be asked some questions if you have fins that meet that definition. Fin flutter is something that's also very complicated as far as getting a consistent method for evaluating it. I've seen all sorts of methods that have been proposed. Some of them I don't know anything about. Some of them are based on information that's been shown to not be accurate and has been updated, but not all teams know that. And then you have FinSim and some other tools that are out there. One of the things that I'm hoping to do as part of the review process is to get at least a single method and a consistent method for looking at fin flare. And I'm not saying that we're going to use the results from that to say that you have met or not met the criteria of the competition, the 1.5 safety factor. But I would say that if teams come up low on that or below 1.0 safety factor, there will be some questions asked about that. One of the things that teams can do to help us on that is to make sure that the design of the fin and the attachment method is well communicated in the progress report, and that you also provide an estimate of the shear modulus of the material that you're using on the fins. And we may or may not agree with the shear modulus that you propose, but at least it'll give us what you think it is. And if you can provide any information on how you determine that shear modulus, whether it's a reference or whether it's testing, that would help too, because that's the number that is always going to be the most difficult thing to determine for calculating fin flare. I also can't help mentioning horizontal velocity. I think it's one of the things that teams overlook in the design of their recovery systems, and it's going to be something that we focus on as a part of this competition. We launch rockets at an angle typically for spacemen. They can be 6 degrees. It's not an unusual launch angle. And one consequence of that, plus things like weathercocking or just the rocket not necessarily going in the direction you want, is that you can acquire a lot of horizontal velocity. And the recovery system needs to be able to deal with it. If you've watched my NARCon 2021 presentation, you know I'm a fan of zipperless couplers because they're good at mitigating horizontal velocity. If you're not using a zipperless coupler, though, you may have a tendency, at the time when you come to put out a drogue, things can happen. You can sever your harness, you can zipper the airframe, you can fold the airframe, and lots of bad things can happen as a result of horizontal velocity. And there are things you can do to mitigate the effects of it. And I'm hesitant to put out a list at this point, but that's something that you should do as you evaluate your design. But one of the things that the reviewers will be doing is looking at what it is that the teams are proposing to do to mitigate horizontal velocity, because it happens and it's responsible for ballistic recoveries. And so that's something that we're going to look at. We also have the 30K and the 45K flights and maybe the demonstration flights. Those altitudes are high enough to where it affects the efficiency of the black powder charges. So one of the things we're going to be doing on those flights is asking specifically about how you're containing black powder and have you considered the effects of altitude, and have you done testing to attempt to mitigate those effects? What's your plan? So I am done, and I'll turn this back over to Steve.
I'm muted. Thanks, Jim.
You bet.
Okay, I guess we're in the question and answer portion of the evening.
Steve, can I do my points?
Oh,
before
sorry,
we do-
Andy, I keep cutting you off. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Alrighty, guys. I'm sorry, I didn't get a chance to update the slide deck, but I have a couple of points we wanted to chat with everybody that's here. And again, thank you for joining. We have 107 people on. It's pretty impressive. Progress report number 2. This is considered your critical design review. You should be responding based off feedback from your safety reviewers. So far, with less than 24 hours to go, we have 36 teams that have submitted theirs, which means we're looking at 140 or maybe 130, 135 teams still needing to submit their progress report in the next 24 hours. If you wait until the last second and you have some type of technical issue and fail to submit yours on time, don't come back to me and tell me there were technical problems. We recommend 3 days before the deadline. So please get those submitted. Don't wait till the last second. And again, we have 36 submitted as of this meeting. So the progress report number 2. Letting everyone know, in case you're not familiar with progress report number 3, that is the video flight readiness review. It is not a form. It's not a document. You're going to be sitting in one of these type meetings with your team and your rocket, and your safety reviewer is going to inspect the rocket for your video flight readiness review. That means if you haven't started building your rocket, you may want to. We only had a couple of issues last year, but that rocket should be pretty close to being ready to, not so much to fly, but at a minimum, be ready to show to your safety reviewer. So please don't let this one sneak up on you. This activity is going to begin in, I think, late March, early April, and be prepared for it. Let's see. I had a question for Jim real quick. You were talking about the igniters. We are, or are we not, still holding the teams responsible for double-headed igniters for the COTS motors?
I don't believe that rule is in the detail. But I would, if I was making an igniter and I was going to use it to launch my rocket, I would include a double-headed igniter. I think one of the things I want to caution people about if they do that is don't use 2 full-size igniters. If you do that, you want to have the total amount of hydrogen on your igniter to be what is appropriate for lighting the motor. You just want 2 E-matches in there to get that hydrogen started.
Thanks, sir. We'll provide some additional guidance via HeroX updates on that as we get closer. And then we'll update the DTAG as necessary as well. And then let's see. I think that was it from my standpoint. That's it. I'm good.
Great. Thank you, Andy. So Steve, I'm gonna start going through the questions with you.
Okay.
The first one you may have seen at the top. It's a long one, but I'm going to summarize from Team 112. They were inquiring about FAA certification and authorization and land ownership permission because their university will not allow them to provide payment to us until that documentation is provided. So they wanted to know if that's available yet, and if not, if they can have an extension for when they pay their fees.
Happy to work with you. Don't know, I've ever, and I don't know, Andy, maybe you have, but have we ever submitted a landowner form and or a FAA certificate to teams so that they could do this? I'm just
Never.
not aware of it. The conditional, so the landowner paperwork, we can send you an email with well, I'm reluctant to send agreements out, so we'll figure this out. Let me put it that way. The FAA portion of this is the FAA, as you may or may not be familiar with the process, the local group go ahead and does their provisional approval. They're the aviation side, or they're the ones below 18,000 feet. For things above 18,000 feet, it goes over to the commercial airspace people, and they get an approval, and then it comes back to the aviation piece to work out sort of the mechanics of the waiver. So right now, when we say it's conditional, we've been given approval through the commercial aerospace, and it's now back with the aviation group. And there's a couple of details with opening launch windows or closing launch windows or that sort of thing that's being committed to paper. But you know, that could still take another 30 days. We actually have the thing in my hand. It could be quicker. It could be a lot quicker based on the focus this thing has gotten, because, you know, like I said, we've had senators involved in working with the FAA to get this done. But I've been given, you know, the assurance that it's going to happen. I just don't have that piece of paper in my hand. Happy to work with your school. Happy to, if you need me to talk to somebody so I understand what they need, happy to do it. And if it needs, you need to hold off on the payment until whatever it is that's satisfied your administration, that's fine with me.
Okay, thank you. And then the next question is asking about if we will be providing a landing zone and boundary map of the launch site, which I believe we do have at least
Yeah.
a preliminary map, so we could share that with the students.
Yep, we sure do. And so the other part of our trip that we're in Midland right now is we're going to absolutely map out everything in this environment. We've got drones with us. We've got our aerial maps, and we'll make sure. And then we're going to also put together the plan for the site itself in terms of where the Ezra operations are going to be, where the LCO will be, where the student prep areas will be. So we're doing that this weekend. Look for something on that probably as soon as next week.
Great. And then another question is, are there any new ITAR restrictions that teams need to be concerned about?
There is nothing new. The thing that we were commenting on was a clarification on a rule that has not been implemented. And at this time, there's nothing new from an ITAR perspective. Fortunately, we will be, hopefully, I say hopefully because it's all been approved, but we have a ITAR lawyer that is going to be representing us for everything we do. So we'll have legal counsel.
Let me add to that real quick, just a comment out to the teams. There were 2,600 plus comments on this. When we sent out the note asking you guys to provide your feedback, and y'all stood up. You stood up, and so many teams submitted comments. Can't thank you enough for that. I think the folks that are running that organization are going to be looking at these and really sort of stepping back, saying we need to rethink this, or we need to, you know, look at some of these recommendations, because it really does impact potentially what we're talking about. So again, appreciate all of that. And you know, I can't speak for anybody, but I would assume that they're going to take some more time to review this, and we'll have probably another evaluation period where they will put out some updated comments or quotes or specific wording, and we'll have the ability to review that and comment on it again. So again, thank you everyone for all of that hard work on the ITAR feedback.
An anonymous attendee asks, could you please define conditionally accepted for the FAA waiver? Jim mentioned that there were 1 to 2 things left. What are those things?
Yes, that's I just described that in the first answer.
Okay, great. And then Matthias asked, when will this information be posted? I'm going to assume that that is the presentation. Maybe they wanted the information from the presentation that we were showing.
Or the video, maybe?
Yeah, we will have a recording of this up later. Will we share the presentation as well?
Sure. No reason not to. Yeah.
And then another anonymous question, is there a signed agreement MOU with TRA for this year that will get replaced with the updated MOU, but will hold regardless of updates?
So I can answer that one, Steve, unless you want to.
No, no, go ahead.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
anyone you want to jump in on, Andy, go for it, right?
guys, we are partnered at the hip with Tripoli Rock Tree Association. So I'm working with Bob Brown, keeping him updated throughout the entire process. I mean, this started with the announcement that we're going to start looking at a new site. And so keeping him updated on the progress, where we are in the struggles and challenges of each particular site, et cetera. And even before we announced it to the world, Bob was updated on which one we were selecting. So the MOU process for 2025 could not start until we had the site selected. He's aware of the selection, and he is looking at the specific details right now with his fellow members of the Tripoli board. And we will be meeting with them very soon to go through the draft MOU for this site. And the general idea is that we will continue very similar to what we had at Spaceport America, and we will continue to follow Unified Safety Code. So from that standpoint, nothing really significant should change. And the moment the MOU is available, we will make that announcement out to the world. It's not a public document, so unfortunately, we won't be able to give it to you guys. But anyways, the agreement will be in place, and the insurance coverage will be the same, and the requirements for Tripoli membership, et cetera, will be the same as in years past as well.
Great, thank you. Lavinia Barker asks, what time can teams begin arriving to the launch site on launch days? And I think I kind of have an answer. We don't know exact times yet. That is still being developed, but we want you all to know and be aware that we don't want to encourage all of the students to lose sleep. So this year we're trying to completely restructure the queuing system so that you know ahead of time a lot more information about when you will be launching. Again, those details will be ironed out a bit later and will be announced to you when we are done planning. But we're hoping that you will not have to come as early to wait in a 2-hour-long line before we start letting you in because you want to launch first for early launch bonus. We're trying to eliminate that as much as possible this year to avoid any accidents. Okay, anonymous attendee asks, are there any concerns of rockets or payloads landing in and around active wells? What are the safety precautions that are being put in place to mitigate hazards?
So I've been assured by the landowner that there's nothing that we could do with a rocket that could hurt their wells. But I'm going to probably. I will definitely better define that. So I don't have that mitigation plan in place just yet, but I've been assured by the landowner that there's nothing we can do to his wells. But like I said, we'll mitigate that. So we're sure that, if there's moving parts or that sort of thing, that we have a plan in place so that we can mitigate the risk.
Yeah, I think they might just want to know, like, it's not going to blow up or anything, right? Like,
Oh, it's
we're not
not,
worried
no.
about any crazy things happening.
No, we'll make sure that we've done a risk analysis of one of the wells so that you can understand. But I've been I've been assured, but we'll make sure that we have a mitigation plan in place.
Okay, great. And then another anonymous attendee asks, does the 200 milliwatt transmission limit apply to all rockets or just those employing SRAD avionics systems?
My understanding is that's all rockets.
Great, thank you. And then Daniel Kampf, sorry if I didn't pronounce that correctly. Will the changes to the ITAR rules mentioned in December be an impediment? I think we basically touched on this. We don't think that that's going to impede on international SRED teams this year.
Yeah, it'll be the same as it was last year. So
Yes.
I think that's the important thing here.
Great, thank you. And then Aryan Anand asks if the goal of our payload is to descend at a low velocity in order to collect data, would we not be allowed to deploy just one parachute at apogee? Are we going to have to use either a reefed main or a main and a drogue on the payload? And I believe that updated rule, Jim, is yes, right?
Yeah, the intent is to bring payloads down as though you were as on drogue, as though they were your rocket. Now, I don't think we have specific minimum velocities listed for a drogue that I'm aware of. So not really quite sure what to say here, but I think if you tell your reviewer that I'm going to bring down my rocket on a semi main at 50 feet per second, the likely response that you'll get is that your launch will be restricted. If there's much of a, if there's much wind at altitude, you won't be able to launch. So be careful what you wish for. And that, let me mention that's one other thing, I mean, if you end up getting a flight restriction like that, for example, that will be implemented through FORs. So your FOR will be instructed not to launch the rocket if it doesn't meet the criteria that comes from the safety team.
Okay, great. And then, Jim, there are a few technical questions that I think are individual teams asking, not necessarily as general questions. Could you go in and type some answers there so we can use a bit of our live time for some of the more general questions?
Yeah, let me jump in real quick. The question on light APRS, that really needs to go into the IREC forums. Let Da Vinci talk to the team specifically about that and whether or not they're able to accept it. So yeah, the same thing with the lithium ion and the huge link.
Great. Yeah, those were the questions I was like, we probably don't want to read those out loud.
I don't want to answer them either.
So the next question we have is, as a flyer of record, how can I see the documents my team has filed? And I think there's a pretty simple way, right, for the teams to just add their flyer of records to their team. So then they'd be able to see what progress reports are submitted.
I don't think that's how exactly it works. I would hope, and we can export it. So if you want to see exactly what they posted, just send an email to general.info@esrarocket, and I guess we can type that in, .org, and request for the specific team and identify yourself as flyer of record. We can export it out, but really, in essence, you should have seen all of that info before it got submitted. That's the idea, is you're evaluating it as it's being put together, and you should be saying, okay, this looks good, you should be able to submit this as a progress report. But if you have not seen anything, or if you're maybe they changed flyers of record, whatever the case might be, again, the team should be working directly with you for all that. If not, worst case scenario, email me and I'll get you an export.
I think there is a tendency for teams to kind of view the FOR as just a kind of a sign off on the flight and not really part of the team. And I've got some teams, and oddly, they haven't sent me information to review for their rockets. And I think that's a mistake. Teams need to be sending their information to their FORs, hopefully prior to submission, so they don't have simple errors, and so the FOR knows what's going on with the rocket. It's a mistake not to include the FOR in your information.
100%. I think we also are working, we've been working for more than a year now, I think, on flyer of record training and what the expectations and capabilities of what they flyer records should expect. So we will continue working on that one. Obviously, we've been a little bit busier this year than normal, but we certainly would like to provide something for those flyers of record so they know what they need to ask.
And we will be doing that. We will have a document that describes mentor and flyer of record responsibilities probably within a few days.
Beautiful.
Great. And then just a quick question, Jim, that I think you can answer in the chat is asking for the video that you referenced about zipperless couplers. So
I'll do that.
great, thank you. Okay, and then the next three questions, I think I can kind of tie into one answer. How will launch order be determined at the site? Is there a specific order for categories launching 45K, 30K on another day? Wondering because of the distance of travel to the launch site. And then the final question that I'm lumping into this is about last year, a team had issues getting telemetry because there were teams transmitting on the same radio frequency at the same time. So how will we be coordinating those? So this is all going to fall into our new uprange operations and our new queuing system. The frequencies are kind of just us working with DaVinci a bit more on that to alleviate those issues. But in terms of launch order, I won't get into too many specifics because we're, like I said, we're still ironing it out, but I feel I can give you a general description. Our plan is to determine as much as we can your launch timing ahead of time before we ever go out to competition. We are building in flexibility so that in the event of a weather event that delays your launch, or if some student teams aren't ready, or if some student teams are ready when another team says they aren't, then we can, on the day of, do some maneuvering and allow teams to jump ahead if we have the space to do so, so that we're ahead of any delays that might happen later in the week. So that's kind of our goal with the new queuing system, is that you might only need to show up to competition in the launch area for 1 or 2 launch days. So our goal is to tell you, we predict that you will be launching on day 1, but please plan to come day 1 and day 2 in case of any weather delay event. But if you launch on day 1, you don't have to come back for day 2, obviously. But we would also suggest, if you're day 2, plan to come on day 1. If you're like an earlier in the queue in day 2, because then if we do get ahead, we can potentially bump you up. So that, again, it's just a very loose overview of the plans that are taking place for the queuing system. But yes, we are planning to give you a heads up, and we don't plan on you having to come every single day. And if you're planned for a Friday launch, we wouldn't expect you to come on the first launch day at all. Okay, so that takes care of those. Oh yes, and like I said, we will be working with DaVinci to make sure that that GPS issue doesn't happen this year. Okay. Tab asks for off-the-rail stability calculations to confirm using equations to verify off-rail stability and velocity beyond open rocket are recommended.
I know some teams are developing their own flight simulation software, and that's just fine. What I'd like them to provide us, and what we will hopefully be generating, though, will be based on either Open Rocket or RAS Aero. And what the stability of those program says about the stability when the simulation is done with no wind. Teams are welcome to expand those simulations or do their own simulations or anything that they'd like. But from the point of view of the reviewers doing the reviews, that's the number that we're going to be looking at as an indicator of whether a rocket meets the requirements.
And Jim, I think I may also be able to give some clarification. I think they may have been a bit confused. When you were explaining the launch rail little calculation that you wrote in there, you were just saying that even though it's a 17-foot launch rail, the actual amount of launch rail that they're using is determined by that little equation you gave, like subtracting the top rail from the bottom rail, right? So it's not that they have to calculate it. It's just that they need to calculate their actual launch rail height, basically.
Well, in talking with Joe Pfeiffer about that, we're not 100% sure exactly what the programs are doing in terms of dealing with where the buttons are and what the velocity is. So what I'm recommending the reviewers and the teams to do is to calculate for your rocket what is the effective length of the rail. Now, the solids rails are 17 feet, the two-stage rails are 20 feet, and the hybrid rails, I'm not sure. That's something that you may need to ask Paul Holmes about for if you're planning to use a rail that is not one that you were bringing. But the point is, you have to calculate the effective length of your rail, and then you have to calculate what is the velocity of the rocket at that point. So you would look at your data. If you calculated a 12-foot effective rail length, you look at your simulation and see what the velocity is when you reach the altitude of 12 feet. And that's your exit rail velocity that you report relative to the requirement in the detail.
Great, thank you. Okay, another question. Are Wi-Fi type switches allowed in active energetic devices? Are they allowed for non-energetic devices?
It's my understanding that there was a prohibition on the use of Wi-Fi switches. My understanding is that got removed.
That's my understanding as well.
Great. Okay, another question. Will there be any accommodations for visible minority groups and LGBTQ plus community members? So I think, obviously, as we mentioned in our previous town hall, we're doing everything that we can to work with our venues to make sure that we are providing a safe environment for LGBTQ plus community members. But I will be sending out a form soon to get your feedback from previous years, and I would also love to hear any feedback on what sort of accommodations would help you feel more comfortable as students attending competition. So obviously, we don't necessarily know everything that you need until we hear it from you. So we want to hear that information from you so that we can start working towards that. But yes, we want to make every accommodation possible for your safety and happiness at the event.
One of the recommendations we actually did here and that we're going to fully implement this year is the liability waiver, the liability forms that all the students fill out. We're going to be adding to that a code of conduct. And part of that code of conduct will be in let me back up actually a step. For at least the last 5 or 6 years, the code of conduct has been a requirement for ESSER volunteers. And that basically identified any form of harassment whatsoever. And it goes through, quite a few examples. It just will absolutely not be accepted. Here's how we'll address it. Here's who will address it. And here are the consequences. That same component is being evaluated and reviewed and updated and edited and will be universal across the board. So all ESSER volunteers, all student participants, including advisors, all that, and then even into the spectator arena. So that is the plan moving forward, And so, again, that hopefully will address some of the concerns, but it is a step forward, I think. So that is something that we're doing on the feedback that we've received so far.
Great. Okay, so any panelists, please, if you see any questions in the chat that you can answer pretty easily, just please answer in a comment form. An anonymous question we received is, if we were to encounter issues with our flyer of record or mentor, is there a process for changing flyers of record?
There absolutely is. Now, one of the concerns is if you don't like the answers your flyer of record is giving you, that's one concern. If we were to help you or assist you in identifying another flyer of record, I guess the next question is, does the safety reviewer agree with it? In the end, the flyer of record is the person whose name is going on the flight card. He accepts responsibility for the flight. If that person has concerns and you disagree with those concerns, then yes, you have the right to look for another flyer of record. You can make that change by updating ESRA. You can post something in HeroX. You can email me directly, general info, whatever the case might be. We're going to investigate. We're going to be curious why and what. So be prepared to answer those type of questions. But it is your right to request, or your right to find another flyer of record. Obviously, you need to keep us updated throughout that process, particularly your safety reviewers, because we want to make sure the flyer of record is kept in the loop on the progress of your rocket. But yes, you do have the opportunity and availability to change flyer records when you need to.
Yeah, another related question is asking if a current team member is working towards their level 3 and
No.
they attain their level 3, can
No.
the FOR be switched?
No, we have been burned too many times on that, where flyer record is going to be launching in March, April, May, whatever the case might be, and something happens. The launch didn't happen, the rocket crashed. I've heard every 10,000 different reasons why. If that person is not a level 3, it's not going to happen. And you have to have a flyer of record for your reviews. And again, going forward, you will not be able to submit an application in the future without a level 3 certified flyer of record. The exception being, of course, if you're flying an L motor, then you would need a level 2 flyer of record.
Okay.
I can answer that, the question about the video.
Yes.
We do have more and more teams that are bringing social media experts, video teams, those type of functions to collect that. And we love to see that. That's very exciting for everyone. And I think it's a very smart and fantastic thing if your organization is capable of doing that. However, that individual or that group of people, you're going to want them out at the pads. You're going to want them in your recovery team. You're going to want them in all the places that those people are not allowed to go. And so if you want a person, a media person, a camera, whatever, we highly recommend that person be a student member of your team and be a AAA member. And you're going to have to put them on the pad team. You're going to have to put them on the recovery team so that they can be in all of those particular places. If you just bring a third-party video team on board, they're going to get put back into the spectator area and likely not even be able to get in the student area. So it's going to have to be a little give and take on the access that they have if they're not part of the student team already.
Great. And then I think the person who asked a question earlier about a team member becoming L3 wanted to clarify their question. I think what they're saying is they had a flyer of record, they have one currently, but there's a student getting L3 certified on the team. They're asking if they could switch if they do become L3. I'm assuming this is a situation where maybe the original flyer of record isn't able to attend competition. That's what I'm kind of getting from their clarification.
Yeah, we'll take that one offline. Put it in HeroX forums or email me directly.
Okay, great.
A couple of things again. Students becoming an L3, yes, it meets the requirement, absolutely. However, that student has one level 3 flight under their belt. And to be the flyer of record for a student team, I'm telling you, we're going to have problems with Tripoli looking at that, saying that's not a good idea. So we're not big fans of doing that, even though legally it does meet the requirement.
Okay, and then another question is, are we allowed to fly drones at the launch site to collect video and also use drones to help with recovery?
Our resident drone expert is not online today, so we'll have to get back and answer that question.
Yeah, if they do similar functions to what we've done in the past, there's going to be insurance requirements to do that. The pilot of that drone will likely have to be a Part 107 certified. It's a challenge to do that. The flights themselves will have to be fully supervised by the lead drone pilot, and they're quite busy doing the live streaming drone functions. It's not an easy thing. It's not just pulling it out, turning it on, and launching it. Unfortunately, so it's not as easy as it sounds, but we will try to get some updates and another good question to go into HeroX to get better answers.
Great. So that finishes what we have open. I did want to ask before we finish up our Q&A, the panelists, are there any questions that you answered in the typed out answer section that you think we should make an announcement about live as well?
There are definitely some really good ones here. One that Anita Jimenez answered: are there any plans to change the scoring system? Will there be sportsmanship, early launch bonus awards, etc.? Her response was right on. Said no plans to change the scoring system. There still will be sportsmanship awards. Updates to launch bonuses are still being discussed. Look for updates in the rules and requirements that will be forthcoming specific to the scoring and early launch bonuses. We've had multiple discussions about lowering and limiting or removing completely the early launch bonuses. And there's multiple schools of thoughts. And again, a lot of debate on that one. I don't see those early launch bonuses getting bigger. So, again, it's a situation where you can't win the event if you don't get the early scoring bonus. And I don't think anybody believes that's the way it should be. So, and we don't want the teams literally fighting over the ability to get launched in those early bonus periods. So, I'm not sure those serve the same purpose that they originally were intended to. And again, with the improved, I think, processes that Sierra is going to implement, just like she did for registration. So any of you old timers that remember the original registration system being a nightmare, and then last year's amazing situation, we're hoping Sierra is able to do that with launch ops side too.
Okay, so we just started getting some more questions.
Yeah.
Do we want to take those offline?
Yeah, why don't we take it offline? I mean, we've taken enough time from people tonight. We schedule these things for an hour and it's an hour and 20 minutes now. We will look at the answers the questions that haven't been answered, and we'll go ahead and get that out. I want to thank everybody for their time. I think that really looking forward to sort of this next chapter in our engineering challenge, and really appreciate everybody's focus tonight.
Thank you all so much.
All right.